Hi, so I was asked to talk about the Mythic Plus score system becoming popular here. Now, the actual comment here I'll talk about here before I sort of explain exactly what the Mythic Plus score system is and my thoughts on it. Be really quick on this one. So personally, I dislike it for several reasons. The first being that Raider IO and WoW Progress. WoW Progress is the one I'll look at mostly here because naturally people would gravitate towards it. People are likely to come across WoW Progress for various other things. And of course, WoW Progress does have a whole list of statistics on your character. It has the item level. There's not a lot you can get wrong there as long as you're logged out in the correct gear. It has Sim DPS. Now, Sim DPS came in a little while ago, and of course, a lot of people read far too much into this. You have to bear in mind that that Sim DPS is based on a particular set of parameters, which doesn't change. You don't change in the way that you could yourself on SimCraft or Raidbots or Ask Mr. Robot or anything like that. And then comes on to the Mythic Plus score. So there's like 4 boxes all about that Mythic Plus score for DPS, for Proving Ground score, the Karma, and just your overall Mythic Plus score. And people are asking for ratings above a certain amount to be able to join groups. This is for people pugging. Now, this is a little bit out of my experience because I only ever do Mythic Plus with my guild, and I do Mythic Pluses when people ask me to, if I'm free, which I am a fair amount of the time. But generally speaking, from my point, I just want to get mine done. I don't mind doing a few. I'm all right with them. I didn't like it when we had to like farm them, and I'm not going to like it if we have to do the same thing in 7.3, which we may or may not. But so my Mythic Plus score is probably not actually good enough to get into one of these groups, and yet I habitually, regularly do plus 15s, plus 16s, 17s every now and then as well, but I don't do that many of them. And so my Mythic Plus score is quite low, but that's okay because I don't need to pug. So for someone who does need to pug, so what is the main downside of it? First of all, any statistic, you have to understand what it's actually telling you. And this is where human nature comes into it. People in general don't really want to understand how something works. They just want the answer to a question. And statistics seems to give you the answer to a question, but the problem is if you don't really understand what that answer is telling you, it can be misleading. And there's any number of cases like this. Like sometime, people notice when I do my guides, for example, if I'm going to talk about talents, I'll explain under what circumstances talents are better. But there's some people who just want to straight up say, what talent shall I use? What talent shall I use? Or which gems shall I use? You sometimes see on Discord people coming on, I go on the Paladin Discord, and say, I've got these 2 pieces of gear, which shall I use? And of course, you have to look at the whole collective. But people just want that answer. They want that, and they think there's a simple answer as well. So obviously something like the WoW Progress score is pretty good. So what is really wrong with it? The main thing that's wrong with it is it does not take into account the Mythic Plus dungeons you do. WoW Progress gets all its statistics from the Armory, from the World of Warcraft Armory. And here's where the problem is. The World of Warcraft Armory say it logs all the gear you're wearing when you log out. So for the item level, it can sort of get that right. It also logs all your stats and everything like that. So it can have a crack at the Sim DPS at least. It's got the data to be able to do it. It just doesn't do enough of it. But for the Mythic Plus score, it can only go by what's on the Armory. And all that's really logged is the top 100 for that realm. So particularly on a large realm, you're not likely to feature very much, if at all. On a smaller realm, maybe you are. But it almost doesn't matter about the realm at all. It's the fact that if you're not into that top 100, the WoW Armory is not going to log it, then it's not going to feature and it doesn't get added to your score, even though you've done it. So you have a situation where someone's score, it's like postcode lottery, we call it in the UK sometimes. Your score doesn't actually really depend on what you do in Mythic Plus. It's partly to do with that, but it can actually vary for 2 people doing exactly the same on different realms. For example, in my guild, I mean, we have a rule where everyone has to do a plus 15, or the raiders, the socials don't have to. But all the raiders have to do a plus 15. The reason for that is because that gets you the highest item level piece of equipment from your weekly mythic cache. Now, how do we check that? In theory, you would just be able to think, well, we could go onto the armory, it'll tell us what the highest Mythic Plus they did the previous week was, but it doesn't. That information is not there because it doesn't log all of that. So what we have to do is we have to do it other ways. We have to look through the loot that people get on Wednesday when they log in, quite frankly, and check that they've got a 930 piece of gear. So there is no way to actually see what Mythic Plus dungeons people are doing, which means that the score is largely meaningless. It's largely meaningless. The people who have the very, very high scores, of course, theirs it's more accurate because they are the ones who are pushing. They are the ones that get into that top 100 on a regular basis. But the ones who are just even doing relatively high keys, but on a realm where loads and loads of people do high keys, it's a lot of the time not being logged. But then people think, they just see on WoW Progress, because they don't know how it's worked out, they see on WoW Progress, oh, there's a Mythic Plus score. This is a measure of how good people are at Mythic Plus. Oh, I want a Mythic Plus group together. I'm going to use my key. I don't want to have it keep being downgraded. I want to do... I mean, apart from anything else, people these days want to do the content quickly. Never mind the fact that it's timed. Obviously, the fact that it's timed means they want to beat that time to get the extra piece of loot. But also, just in general terms, people, especially when they're doing pugs, don't want it to last any longer than it has to. So they generally want to get the best people they can. And they sort of know you don't really... I mean, when you're doing a pug raid, you go by item level and head of the curve. You don't really have that for Mythic Plus. So what do you do instead? Oh, there's a score system here. I will use that. And therein lies the problem with it. That being said, it's one of those things that we are going to have to live with. It's a little bit like Gear Score. When that add-on Gear Score came in Wrath. And it's one of these things that it's not Blizzard's fault. It's nothing to do with Blizzard. Blizzard don't have nothing to do with WoW Progress or any other site that does the same sort of thing. So they can't do anything directly about it. The only reason Gear Score went away, there was something there Blizzard could do about it, and they did. They let us know about item level. Item level had always been a thing. It's just that we never got to see it on individual pieces of gear. But when they introduced it, and then there was no more point in Gear Score because everyone could just say item level, it's still not necessarily as meaningful because we all know what it's like, especially in Legion. If you put on your highest item level gear, that's actually not your best gear necessarily. You know, most people's equipped item level is lower than the max item level they're capable of. But of course, getting into a pug, if you need a certain item level to get in, people will just don their highest item level pieces, even if it means their damage, healing, survivability as a tank, whatever goes down, just to get into that group. But then, what could Blizzard actually do about a Mythic Plus score? Not a lot, really. You know, you can't reasonably ask them to log everyone's Mythic Plus in there. Presumably, I don't know, but I'm guessing it's because it would just use up a massive amount of data for them to do that, and they don't really feel like doing that. And again, why should they? This is a community thing. It's the community that are using this Mythic Plus score. But it is one of those things, human nature, and you can't educate everyone. Obviously, YouTubers like myself like to do guides where we explain to people how things work and maybe how the way you naturally feel something works is not actually how it works at all. But at the end of the day, there's only a relatively small number of the player base that even watch these sort of videos. And of those who do, there's only so many who believe it. So you are stuck with it. So anyone who is pugging groups, and I say the standard thing I will always say in this case is what you really want to do is get a group to do it, a group that you know. And the thing here, they've actually said this at the bottom, their final comment. Now, the obvious way around this is to do it with friends, but as you pointed out in the video, there are people who only really play for raiding. So if you're in a raid guild, as I am, yes, there are people, I'm probably one of them, that essentially wants to raid. I like a few Mythic Pluses, but I essentially do the Mythic Plus for the rewards it gives. It's not something I'm bothered about doing lots of. And then it says, so it doesn't matter that I've got a good raid group and some chill people if they don't do Mythic Plus at all. So this is probably one of those things where WoW Progress actually could help you. The Mythic Plus score system is not helping you at all. But what you notice on WoW Progress now, they've made some improvements in Legion. I wish they'd make a few more, but they've made some. One of which is you can flag yourself, as well as looking for a guild, you can flag yourself as looking for Mythic Plus groups. Now, you may run into the same problems there as with anything else. that someone may look at your Mythic Plus score when deciding whether you should join their group or not. But you have the option in the comments box to put in some logs. Maybe you should log some of your Mythic Plus dungeons, show that you're effective at decently high keys. They'll be able to see that. That actually could be a way to get into it, because you can flag yourself on WoW Progress as looking specifically for Mythic Plus groups, not guilds, not new guilds. And that may be one way around that in terms of any sort of useful advice I can give, because the score system is not going to go away. People's ignorance of the score system is not going to go away. So if you are reliant on pugs to do this thing, you are going to be bound by the Mythic Plus score system. And if that's not going to help you, you are going to need to find your own Mythic Plus group, even if it's of people in other guilds. So I hope that was interesting. If it was, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.